We are live, and we are back. Okay. Everyone should have gotten a handout for position paper, the basics. Also, before we continue, everyone remember what we're doing tomorrow? Test. For which chapter?
Chapter
8. 5.
I love how you looked right at the camera when you said that. Chapter 5 test tomorrow. Anyways, today we're going to do a little bit of writing. This is all spontaneous. Okay, not this. I made this beforehand. Today we are going to go over the guidelines for position paper. Now you might be thinking, well, Mr. Quadra, why do we have to do that? How many of you, just a show of hands, how many of you would intend to go to -1 social studies? Okay, so about, I would say like 80% of you, 90% of you. Okay, excellent. In the -1 stream, you write 2 types of essays. We've already done a lot of practice on source analysis. We've already looked at how that format works. The other type of essay that you do is a type of position paper. Typically at the WRA, the written response assignment for the position paper, you respond to a prompt. So they give you a quote at 30-1. Okay, you need to analyze it, figure out what they're trying to say, what the perspective is, and then write on that perspective, okay, with your response. In grade 9, we don't necessarily need to do all of that detail. We can focus on the key building points of a good position paper response. Okay. So this type of essay can vary. You may be asked to respond to a particular question or theme. Okay, that could be like language arts. How many of you wrote some essays in language arts? Okay, raise your hand. Raise your hand. I made you write. Okay. Most of you wrote essays. Okay. How many of you had Mr. Suko's class? Okay, so Mr. Suko's style was you come up with 3 main points. Is this correct?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. So you're already very familiar with the standard position paper. How many of you wrote thesis statements? Beautiful. Mr. Suko did my job for me. This is excellent. Okay, this is why this is what I love. You know, when things work together. Okay. Because ideally, grade 9 in social studies, we don't necessarily do the teaching per se. We might do the specific mechanics of, you know, how do you analyze a source, how do you respond to a particular assignment, but ideally, you know, much of this is taught in language arts. Okay. Or, so on the language arts side, or you may be tasked with responding to a particular topic or self-selected question. This is more of a social studies, humanities. How many of you, I know it's pretty early to ask, how many of you think you might go to university? Okay. So we're looking at about half of you. Okay. In university, what they make you do is they usually have some sort of, well, particularly if you're in the humanities, right? So if you're going to go do some scientific thing, it's a little bit different. Scientific journals, articles are a bit different. You're answering a question still like you would in the humanities, but you are using a lot of your own research, right? If you're in the humanities, so something more social studies type related, you might have to come up with your own self-selected question. Now, the downside to that is that in high school, they rarely make you do essays where you come up with the question. And right now, you know, you might be a little too like all over the place to come up with a good question yourself, boys at the back. See what I mean by all over the place? You can't focus. That's okay, because sometimes this stuff is boring. He's still talking. I'm literally, okay, I'm just gonna move over. You. Let's go. What are you waiting for? Not you, him.
Oh, me?
Yeah, you.
Oops.
Okay, anyways, so for a position paper, particularly position paper, typically you must do research in order to complete this task. Okay. In high school, in your diploma, instead of doing research, typically you bring up evidence from stuff you've learned in class. Okay, so we've learned about immigration, we've learned about individual rights, collective rights, we've learned about the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and we've learned about the Canadian government. Those are your 5 chapters. So if you were to make a response, let's say we had a question, should Canada continue to accept immigrants? Go to your chapter 5. Look at what we learned. Go to your other chapters and see what we learned about the role and function of the government and the Charter. Okay. The research is done so it demonstrates to the reader that you have an informed understanding of the topic. Do we understand what that phrase means? An informed understanding. What might that mean? Miguel, you raised your hand. You did raise your hand. But you're messing with that guy. But let's hear. What do you think an informed understanding means? What does it mean to be informed on a subject?
Know lots about it.
To know lots about it, right? So have an understanding that is knowledgeable. Why is that important? Because that's not clear, right? Like, why should you be knowledgeable about the things you're writing and responding to? What's that? So you do well.
So that you can help others understand it.
You can help others understand it. So that, and you know, one of the more important ones, so that people might actually listen. Right? Because if if I started talking about physics 30, please, by all means, I'm telling you, if I start talking about physics 30, just take both your fingers and do this. Because I don't know anything about physics 30. Okay? I dropped it in the first week while we were doing physics 20 review. Because I was that lost. Okay? So, ideally, if you have an informed understanding, you know what you're talking about, people might actually listen. In high school, you're lucky. You know, they give you something called a rubric. Yes, you may. Okay. In university, I don't think I got a single rubric. Not once. Okay, now how many of you actually, I'm blocking the camera, don't worry. How many of you actually look at the rubrics? Excellent, 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 excellent. Oh, no way you just did that, so I would say excellent too. Okay, no, that's awesome. Okay. That's a lie.
No, I wasn't paying attention though.
Oh, and you admitted to it. You just raised your hand. Okay, that's okay. Reading the rubric is going to help you understand what your instructor wants from you, right? In university, they don't really give you a rubric. But here are some keys to a good response, right? A response that might actually get you a good mark. And most of you are probably interested in getting a good mark. So let's say you are answering a question. The questions answered within your essay are sophisticated and multifaceted. It's not a simple yes or no question that you're answering, nor are you answering it just by saying yes. Like, sure, yes is a response, but is it a sophisticated response?
No, it isn't.
No. Right. Many of you love doing this, and I don't blame you, because, again, school is boring. You'll say yes, and you'll provide one sentence for your reason. Is one sentence enough?
No.
Maybe, sometimes, kind of, right? Occasionally, very rarely, maybe if you're like a really good writer. Generally speaking, one sentence might be enough to get you like a 50%. Raise your hand if you want a 50%. Will you just raise your hand?
I don't want to, but I don't fail.
That's not a fail, fair enough, right? So one sentence, again, is not sophisticated, it's not multifaceted. You understand what this word multifaceted means? Multifaceted means you're analyzing it from a variety of angles. Right? So if you have one sentence, you're probably just looking at it from one angle. Which, again, isn't wrong, but you can do more than that, right? Like you're all intelligent and capable. Okay? The arguments provided are logical, so they make sense and are coherent. If you just put down gibberish because you need to meet a word count, which a lot of university essays, usually they tell you pages. They say 10 pages. Okay? Yeah, 10 pages, terrible. 12 pages sometimes, right? Or if if you decide to do a PhD, you do a dissertation, a thesis, and that's like a booklet. It's like this thick, right? You spend like 2 to 4 years researching, maybe 6 years. It's very important that the arguments you provide are logical. They make sense. Okay, they go from A to B to C to D. Not A, Y, Z, X, H, right? Okay. There is a depth of understanding demonstrated in the response. Okay, this relates to your informed understanding. So you have either studied or thought deeply on the subject. It's even better if you did both. Right? So again, if you're just writing a one-sentence response or a very simple argument, sure, that might get you your satisfactory, you'll get your passing grade, but what is that really doing for you in the long term in terms of developing your ability to write, to think, to speak? Which I should give you the lecture on the importance of writing as well at some point. I feel like I gave it to your LA class. You wouldn't remember it because you weren't paying attention. Who else was in that class? You were in that class, but do you remember? Probably. It was a while ago. Okay, that's okay. Last but not least, I put a star here, a little asterisk, because this is a little complicated. The topic and position established, and the method in which one responds is interesting. Okay. This is important because it suggests that the topic selected challenge the writer to think and to learn. Okay, so I see eyelids drooping. You're already falling asleep. Every now and then, you get lucky enough where you get given an assignment that you can explore your own interests. If you do get that opportunity, which, spoiler alert, I'm going to give you an opportunity to write on a subject you'd like to. Soon enough, eventually, not today. Take that opportunity. It's very interesting. It's very fun. Okay? My grade 10 social studies teacher did that for us. I still remember what I learned from this project. Okay, yes? So I'm more interested in students developing their ability to write. So if it's an interesting question, like by all means, right? Like it's grade 9, you're all gonna go to grade 10 anyways. So as long as you learn the skill of how to write. So what's a question that came to mind that you might wanna write about? Okay, so I wrote a little short essay last week on the topic of how to improve the school system, because I have ideas on that. So that interested me. Did I do any research? No, I just put together my own thoughts, right? But as someone in grade 9, like maybe you want to explore the idea of should school start at 10 a.m. Rather than 8:45? Like, how do we feel about that? You're shaking your head, no way. Okay. Here's another question. I asked this to my friend who's a teacher. Should all your classes be 85 minutes long, or should some be shorter and others be longer? So whatever question it is you'd like to explore, particularly for writing, again, if it's something that you're interested in, that will show in your writing. And maybe you'll be more invested in your response, which makes the response interesting and enjoyable to read, which likely is going to result in a higher mark. If you flip over, you'll see a basic writing guide, just a general writing guide. Your first paragraph's pretty straightforward. You introduce the topic, so whatever question you selected. For the two of you who are in my LA classes, you'll know that typically I try to give 3 or 4 different questions, a variety of topics that people can respond to, whatever maybe captures as much interest as possible. So you always want to introduce the topic of the question you've selected. Okay, it's a bit abstract, so if you're going to write about dinosaurs, because I had some grade 10s do a project on dinosaurs last year. Maybe start by explaining what a dinosaur is, when they lived, how people discovered them. You could talk about the process. Introduce the perspective taken. So maybe you think dinosaurs were fake. Maybe you think it's all a big conspiracy theory, right? So make sure you state, although many people believe in dinosaurs, it is in fact a conspiracy theory. Dinosaurs are fake. Maybe you think the Earth is 6,000 years old. Okay. This is where you develop your position on the topic, what side you take. And that relates a lot to your social studies essay, right? You're going to have to either agree, disagree, or find some sort of nuance in the topic. Yes, you have a question?
You have to say like I believe?
No. Very key takeaway, grade 9s, in a position paper, you never use the word I. Right? Like you don't want to say, I think this, I think that. Right? I think for the first time we try this, sure, maybe I'll let it slide, and we'll look at that as a class and we'll address the issue. But generally, as you get into a higher grade, you want to stop using those I statements. Okay?
Then how are you supposed to say something to the fact if it's a conspiracy? Like, aren't you not allowed to say it is a conspiracy theory because then it's fact?
Well, it isn't like an I statement, particularly. So you might say, it is believed by some people that dinosaurs are a conspiracy, that they weren't real. Right? you want to use like a third person perspective. How many of you are familiar with third person perspective? Like, I don't know if they really do that anymore, right? You can write in the first person where you say, I think, I do, or the third person, which would be, you know, one might believe that dinosaurs are fake. One might also be on many substances that affect their ability to think. Okay. Anyways, once you've done the first two things, then you introduce your thesis statement. Your thesis statement is a clear statement which tells the reader what your arguments are to support the perspective being taken. Usually you're going to have three main arguments, right? So your thesis statement is going to list out 3 reasons why you think dinosaurs are a conspiracy. Okay. Reason 1, no one's ever seen them. Reason 2, no one really knows a paleontologist. I don't know a paleontologist. Do you know one? Okay. Number 3, if I understand correctly, a lot, if not all, of the dinosaur skeletons in museums are actually they're fake. They're like plaster. Apparently, a lot of dinosaur skeletons. This is true. I've heard this. Apparently, a lot of dinosaur skeletons are radioactive. I don't know why. They just are.
But it's rock, isn't it?
Well, it's bone. It's calcified bone, right? So the calcium was replaced with something like that. I don't know. Calcified bone. I don't know. I'm not a paleontologist, kids. I'm just trying to come up with a quirky idea. Okay. Your reasons must be in order. So whatever you say is your first argument. So no one's ever seen one. My first paragraph, paragraph 2, the first argument has to talk about how no one's ever seen one. You can't skip these. It demonstrates that you don't understand how to write properly. Okay. I think you gotta move. You. I think so. We're gonna give you one last chance.
One last chance.
You've had plenty of chances. Of course, is the last. Here's some extra notes here. There's many ways to go about this. Sometimes a lot of people just write 3 arguments in favor of their stance on the subject. Some people have 2 things that support them and 1 thing that they counter, right? So you might say, many people believe that dinosaurs are real because of, whatever reason, because of the fossil record. Okay, disprove the fossil record, right? I mean, I don't think you can, but okay. So that's addressing the primary criticism. Paragraph 2, 3, and 4, they all look the same. It's your first, second, and third argument. Again, you want to introduce the argument, provide evidence to support your claim, provide 1 to 3 sentences to reconnect to your perspective being taken. Okay, so these paragraphs are pretty straightforward. That's like, has anyone here had this gourmet treat? It's called a burger. Okay, we had a burger here. Okay, how many of you once in your life had a Big Mac? Okay, so you know how a Big Mac, sometimes they're really big. As you start biting into it, the insides fall out, right? Yeah. So then you're eventually just eating 2 pieces of bread with Big Mac sauce. How fun is that?
No. Fantastic.
Okay, anyways, for those of us with taste, we recognize that the real fun is in the patty. Paragraph 2, 3, and 4, the patty. This is the meat and potatoes of your meat potato rice dish at home.
Or the bacon. Or the meat and the bacon.
Sure, but I'm Muslim, so we don't eat bacon, right? If you eat bacon, this is the bacon, right?
No, I put bacon in my Boston burger.
Last but not least, grade 9s. You have paragraph 5. This is your final paragraph. I should actually rewrite that as your conclusion. Let's bring it back in. Thank you. You reflect on the analysis of the perspective, so particularly for your social studies assignment, and based on your explained and informed understanding, answer the question and the task completely. Okay. So a lot of this is abstract, so let's do this together spontaneously.